The dream you repeat each night is not random. It's delivering a message you're too afraid to face. There are dreams that jolt you awake in the middle of the night. Sweat clinging to your back. Heart pounding. Carrying a strange heaviness you can't quite name. These dreams do not come to frighten you. They come to remind you of the parts within you that you have abandoned for too long. In this video, we will explore the hidden messages behind those dreams, so you can finally listen and begin to heal yourself. You wake up in the dark, your shirt soaked with sweat, your heart still racing, and the image of someone chasing you etched into your mind. Or you see yourself screaming in a crowded room, trying to release everything you've been holding back, but your throat locks, and no words come out. Sometimes you dream of a massive wave sweeping away everything you've worked so hard to protect, leaving behind an emptiness you can't describe. Dreams don't care how strong you've tried to appear, how kind you've forced yourself to be, how many times you've stayed silent to keep the peace, or how often you've swallowed your needs to avoid upsetting others. Dreams care only about one thing: whether you are truly living in alignment with the deepest truth of who you are. Over the past 2 decades, as I have walked alongside people who have crossed the midpoint of their lives, I have listened to countless stories of strange, intense, and sometimes haunting dreams. These dreams often belong to those seen as kind, gentle, always willing to help, fathers and mothers who have spent their entire lives carrying the weight of responsibility, prioritizing everyone else's needs above their own, swallowing their tears, suppressing their anger to uphold the image of being a good person. They believe that if they keep giving, keep staying silent, keep holding themselves together, they will be loved, and they will not be abandoned. But their dreams whisper a different story. A story about the parts of themselves they have rejected. The part that longs to cry, to scream when exhausted, to feel anger when their boundaries are crossed, to say no when they are at their limit. I remember a woman, her hair already streaked with gray, her eyes always reflecting gentleness and duty. Her entire life, she had been a mother, a devoted teacher, always smiling, always placing others first, always maintaining composure in every situation. She shared with me a recurring dream in which she was swimming in a bottomless dark lake, desperately trying to keep a child afloat, while she herself was being pulled down into the cold, black water. In the morning, she would sit quietly on the edge of her bed, tears rolling down her face, terrified, unable to understand why she kept having such dreams. But the truth is, this was not her collapse, nor was it a condemnation. It was the voice of a soul that had been suppressed for too long. The part that had endured, sacrificed, stayed silent, and had forgotten how to breathe, how to live authentically with its own emotions. The child struggling in her dreams was not someone else. It was the deepest part of herself, the part longing for freedom, for rest, for release from the burden of unconditional kindness. It was the part that once dared to dream, once felt anger at injustice, once knew how to cry when sadness overwhelmed, once knew how to say no when the heart grew tired. These dreams do not come to scare us. They come to remind us. It is time to stop. It is time to save ourselves. If you continue to imprison yourself in the shell of the good person out of fear of being abandoned, the shadow within you will not disappear. It will grow, demanding to be seen, to breathe, and it will show up as sudden exhaustion, unexpected tears, unexplainable anger, and the dreams that wake you in the night. Your dreams do not need to be decoded immediately. You do not need to understand every image they bring, but you can start by listening, by writing down what remains when you wake, the images, sensations, fragments of dialogue that linger before they fade like morning mist. Because these are not just dreams. They are messages from the part of your soul longing for you to turn toward it, to listen, to embrace it, so you can begin to step out of fear and return to living as a whole, free, and authentic human being. There are days when you smile back at a careless comment, even as it leaves a scratch inside your heart. You nod and agree to help, even when your body is already worn and aching. You swallow your anger, comforting yourself with silence to keep the peace around you, even as your own inner world falls out of harmony. We grew up with lessons about being obedient, about the importance of kindness, patience, smiling, and saying yes to be loved and accepted. And so, we put on the costume of the good person, moving through life with a smile, a nod, light steps, while the most authentic parts of us are left behind, locked away, labeled bad, simply because they do not fit the image others expect. But those parts never truly disappear. They wait patiently, returning quietly, sometimes through dreams you don't understand, through exhaustion that has no cause, through tears that come unbidden, or anger that bursts out before you can control it. I remember a man in his 50s, a devoted father, a gentle husband, a colleague always willing to carry extra burdens for others. Yet at night, he would dream of himself screaming, breaking things, trapped in a dark room, waking up in fear and shame, thinking he was turning into a bad person. But his anger did not make him bad. It was simply a voice reminding him that it was time to pause, to turn inward, to recognize that kindness does not mean abandoning oneself. Anger, when listened to, is not destruction, it is a boundary. It speaks when you are being overwhelmed, when others' demands are too much, when your silence is costing you your own inner peace. And envy? It is not a sign of weakness or failure. It points to what you deeply long for, the parts of life you have pushed aside out of fear, responsibility, or the roles you have forced yourself to carry. Sometimes, it is a longing for freedom, a desire to speak your truth, to live a life that is not about pleasing everyone else. Even healthy selfishness deserves to be heard, because you cannot continue to give if you are running empty. Learning to say no when needed, preserving space for yourself, is not selfishness. It is how you protect your life. So the love you offer others is no longer a weary obligation but a gift from a soul that is whole and overflowing. Self-respect is not arrogance. It is the quiet recognition of your worth. It is understanding that you do not need to shrink yourself to make others comfortable. That you do not need to exhaust yourself trying to be the good person just to earn love. When you learn to love yourself first, the love you offer others becomes whole, free from conditions, free from resentment. There are nights when the noise of the world has finally settled, and you lie there, eyes open, staring at the dark ceiling, feeling a heaviness you cannot name. A faint sound from within, like a soft calling, echoes quietly, yet you are too afraid to move closer to it. All our lives, we were taught to be obedient, to be kind, to be patient, to smile so that we could be loved and accepted. We put on the armor of the good person as we walk through relationships, jobs, and years of our lives, only to one day realize we are slowly disappearing within our own existence. How many times have you smiled at careless words that left your heart aching? How many times have you nodded in agreement when your body was already exhausted? Your mind already tired? How many times have you swallowed your anger, telling yourself to stay silent just to keep the peace? But these feelings do not vanish on their own. They find their way into sleepless nights, unexplained aches, and tears that fall without warning. Anger is not the enemy. It does not come to destroy but to protect you from intrusion, from unreasonable demands, from the injustices you have endured in silence for too long. It whispers, "Enough," and when ignored, anger does not disappear. It transforms into chronic fatigue, constant tension, or erupts in moments you least expect. Envy, too, is not a sign of weakness. It is a mirror reflecting the desires you once had, The dreams you once longed to reach but buried under responsibilities and fear. When you find yourself envying another's freedom or confidence, it is a part of you yearning to live authentically, to step out of the safety you have built, to finally choose yourself. And healthy selfishness is not a sin. We cannot continue giving when we are empty. Knowing how to say no when needed, preserving space for yourself, listening to the exhaustion within your body is not selfishness, it is an act of self-love. Allowing you to love others from a place of wholeness. Self-respect is not arrogance. It is the understanding that you have value, that you deserve to take up space in this world without shrinking to fit into someone else's comfort. You do not need permission to be yourself. You do not need to contort yourself to meet others' expectations. These emotions, anger, envy, the longing for rest, the need to be respected, are not meant to be dismissed. They are meant to be heard, to be welcomed, because when you find the courage to face them, to listen and integrate them, you begin the journey back to your truest self. No longer living just to please everyone. No longer exhausting yourself to be loved. No longer staying silent to keep the peace. But living to truly be present with your strength, your vulnerability, your kindness, your limits, your desires, your softness. All of it is you. All of it is worthy of being honored. There comes a moment, when life has finally grown quiet enough, that we touch a question we have never dared to ask. Am I shrinking myself just to be accepted? This is not an act of rebellion. It is the moment you stop running away from yourself. It is the moment you begin to step out of the shell of the good person that has kept you confined for far too long. Many people I have met have spent nearly their entire lives wearing the label of good person, wherever they go, in the workplace, within their families, among friends, in every daily conversation. They know how to listen even when they are tired, how to smile even when their hearts are breaking, how to say yes when every part of them longs to say no. They are loved, respected, admired, yet, in a quiet room, when no one else is around, they encounter a vast emptiness, where the question, "Who am I really?" echoes with no answer. We were taught to be patient, to give, to yield, to please others so we could be worthy of love. But no one taught us that, along the way to becoming the good person, parts of our truest selves were left behind. Carl Jung called this the shadow. The parts of us that were hidden, not because they were bad, but because they did not fit the image of the good person we thought we needed to become. It is the anger we swallowed, the sadness we hid behind a smile, the longing for freedom we silenced out of fear of judgment, and the tears we wiped away quickly so we could keep being strong. Kindness itself is not wrong, but when it is built upon fear, upon the need for approval, it becomes a burden that exhausts you, even when you cannot admit it to yourself. I remember a woman in her 60s, retired after many years of teaching. Throughout her life, she was the friend, the mother, the colleague everyone turned to when they needed help. But when her children had grown, and life became quieter, she began waking each morning with a nameless fatigue, carrying within her a quiet question: have I truly lived as myself? Or have I only lived to please everyone else? It wasn't that she lacked love for others. But after all those years, she realized she had forgotten how to love herself, how to listen to the quiet call within, how to cherish the small joys that once made her heart light. That moment was not a collapse. It was a turning point, an invitation to return home. Because you were not born merely to be the good person in other people's eyes. You were born to be whole. Wholeness means allowing yourself to feel anger without becoming violent. It means being able to say no when you are tired, without feeling guilty. It means holding your boundaries without fearing you will be abandoned. It means acknowledging your desires without shame. When you begin to turn toward the parts of yourself you have long forgotten, Your kindness no longer comes from fear or the need for praise, but from an inner fullness. In that space, kindness becomes a gift you offer, not a duty you must bear. You give, not because you are afraid of being left behind, but because you have enough within yourself to give. You smile, not to avoid conflict, but because your heart is light, no longer burdened by pretending. You agree or decline, not out of fear of being disliked, but because you know your worth. You do not need to become the good person to be worthy of love. You simply need to be yourself, whole, true, and free. And from this place of wholeness, the kindness you offer can truly heal, not only others, but your own heart as well. There are things we do in the name of love that quietly become the very chains that bind us and those around us. In Carl Jung's depth psychology, there are archetypes hidden beneath the image of the good person that we often fail to see. We call them the savior, the martyr, the innocent, the mother. And each of these archetypes carries a shadow when we live fully within that role without conscious awareness. The savior arrives with hands ready to help, deeply sensitive to the pain of others. They will be there whenever someone needs them, willing to set aside their own needs to rescue others. Yet, deep down, they need others to need them to feel worthy. When they are no longer needed, they feel empty, abandoned, invisible. The martyr sacrifices, endures, carries burdens. They give without asking, without complaint, believing that their sacrifice is proof of their love and morality. But deep within, there is a silent resentment, a bitterness when their sacrifices go unrecognized, or when they do not receive the love they believe they have earned. The innocent maintains an image of gentleness, agreeableness, and peace, avoiding conflict at all costs. But they often fear the depths of their own being, afraid of powerful emotions like anger, passion, or desire. They fear they will no longer be loved if they reveal these less pleasant parts of themselves. The mother, the archetype so celebrated by society for nurturing, caring, protecting, yet the shadow of the mother is the hidden control beneath that care. When they can no longer separate love from control, their children grow up suffocated, while they themselves feel tired and alone when they are no longer needed. I once worked with a retired woman, seen by everyone as a wonderful mother. She had spent her entire life caring for her husband, her children, her friends, her church, but when her children grew up and built families of their own, she found herself empty, adrift. She told me, "I spent my whole life taking care of everyone, but now, I don't know who will take care of me." This is not ingratitude on the part of her children. It is the harsh reality we face when we merge our entire sense of self-worth with the role of the good person. When that role is no longer needed, we suddenly fall into a deep pit of loneliness and confusion. I am not saying you should not be kind, or that you should not love. But if your love stems from fear, from a need for validation, from avoiding yourself, then it is no longer pure love. Have you ever felt exhausted from always being the listener? From always being the problem solver? From always being the peacemaker? Have you ever felt anger rising within you, but you swallowed it down out of fear of disappointing others? Have you ever found yourself sacrificing so much, only to feel a quiet resentment when no one notices your efforts? These questions are not meant to make you blame yourself. They are here to help you look more deeply at the shadow hidden beneath your image of the good person. You do not need to abandon kindness, but you do need to ask whether your kindness carries a hidden burden, a need to be loved, a fear of being abandoned. When you begin to recognize the archetypes hidden within you, you can start choosing a different way of living, helping others from a place of freedom, not obligation, giving without sacrificing yourself, saying no when needed to protect your boundaries, caring for others without controlling them. You were not born to play the roles others need you to play. You were born to be yourself, kind, strong, free, whole, and only then does your kindness truly become a gift of healing. For yourself and for those around you. There is a strange paradox. We have always been taught that kindness is one of the most important virtues. But no one ever told us that kindness can become a cage when it no longer flows from freedom but from fear. When kindness is no longer a free choice, but a duty to avoid conflict or to be liked, it becomes a defense mechanism. We fear losing love if we stop being good. We fear conflict, fear disappointing others. Slowly, we begin to believe that kindness is the only way to stay safe. But you know, that defense mechanism does not eliminate your anger or exhaustion, it only buries them deeper inside. Carl Jung said that emotions we reject do not disappear, they leak out through other paths. When we continue being kind to maintain a certain image in others' eyes, our shadow grows. It can show up as chronic exhaustion, unexplained headaches, quiet depression, or in the way we silently judge and resent those who are not as good as we are. I remember a woman in her 60s, always ready to help her neighbors, taking care of her grandchildren, tirelessly participating in community activities. But one day, she sat in front of me and sighed, "I feel like I'm disappearing. I keep giving, I keep smiling, but I feel like there's nothing left of me." That is not kindness. That is self-abandonment disguised as kindness. Have you ever smiled and agreed to help someone while you were utterly exhausted? Have you ever held back your true feelings to keep the peace, while inside, you were in turmoil? Have you ever tried to do everything perfectly, just to feel seen and acknowledged? If so, ask yourself, am I being kind because I want to? Or because I am afraid? Am I giving because I am full? Or because I don't know how to say no? Am I exhausted because I am trying to be good in everyone's eyes? When kindness comes from fear, it is no longer giving, it becomes an unconscious transaction for safety. At that point, kindness becomes a mask, while beneath it lies your exhaustion, repressed anger, and the sadness of not being truly seen. The point is not to abandon kindness. It is to transform kindness into a conscious choice, not an obligation. When you learn to set boundaries, to listen to your own needs, to say no when necessary, your kindness becomes stronger, truer, and life-giving, not only to others, but to yourself. There are moments when we find ourselves shrinking inward as we watch others dare to cry, dare to express their anger, dare to boldly say no to unreasonable demands. We feel discomfort in the presence of their freedom, not because they are wrong, but because there is a part within us that longs to live that way. Yet we have not admitted it to ourselves. And sometimes, behind the gentle smile, the quiet yes, the ever-present kindness, there is an unnameable anxiety. A part of us is exhausted from constantly having to uphold the image of the good person in front of everyone. Carl Jung once said, "What you resist not only persists, but will grow in size." The emotions we abandon, anger, hurt, the longing for rest, for recognition, for freedom, remain within us, and they will find their way back into our lives in different forms. Sometimes, they come as recurring dreams, where we are chased, where we scream but no one hears, where we run from something but cannot escape. Sometimes, they show up as a deep exhaustion, a fatigue without clear reason, even as we continue to live kindly for everyone else. Sometimes, they appear in the judgments we place on others, those who dare to live authentically while we continue to suppress ourselves. This exhaustion is not just about age, work, or responsibilities. It is also about how we have abandoned ourselves in this life, swallowing too many no's just to be liked, staying silent for too long to keep the peace, holding back tears and anger to maintain the image of the good person. The shadow is not your enemy. It is the part you once neglected, denied, traded away to feel loved, accepted, safe, and when it returns, it is not a betrayal, it is a call from the part of your soul that longs to be heard. Perhaps it is time for you to pause, place your hand on your heart, and realize, you do not need to keep forcing yourself to be the good person to be worthy of love. You do not need to stay silent forever to be accepted. You do not need to force a smile when you are exhausted. This is not an invitation to become selfish or indifferent. This is an invitation to begin the journey back home to yourself. When you start listening to these signals, recognizing the parts of yourself you have abandoned, daring to step into the darkness to understand it, you begin the deepest process of healing, not by denying the shadow, but by embracing it, understanding it, so that it no longer unconsciously controls your life. Observe the signs of your shadow as it emerges, and allow yourself to begin the journey back to wholeness. When you start recognizing these signs, you can pause, listen, write down your true feelings, or talk to someone you trust to share what you have been hiding. This is the first step of shadow work, to recognize, to accept, and to begin a dialogue with the parts of yourself that you have forgotten. Jung once said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate." This means that if we continue to ignore the truest parts of ourselves, we will continue to repeat patterns, entering relationships where we must exhaust ourselves to be the good person, or finding ourselves in situations where we must sacrifice our own needs to keep a false peace. The point is not to abandon kindness, but to reclaim your inner freedom, so that when you smile, it is a genuine smile. When you help someone, it comes from love, not from the fear of being disliked. When you say, no, it is not selfishness, but the necessary boundary that allows you to continue giving sustainably. You were not born to imprison yourself in the role of the good person. You were born to become a whole human being, full, free, kind by choice, loving with sincerity, and courageous enough to live your truth. If today's message has touched you, perhaps you are at a stage in your life where you need to pause and look inward. If you have experienced strange dreams, nameless exhaustion, or a quiet longing to live more authentically but don't know where to begin, you are welcome to share your story in the comments. Perhaps your story will help someone else who feels lost find a path back to themselves. If you feel called to continue exploring shadow work and understanding your inner shadow, consider subscribing to this channel so you don't miss future reflections. The journey back to wholeness is not easy, but you do not have to walk it alone. I'll see you in the next video.